People say, you're the best boss. And well, I think that pretty much sums it up. Well, today is my birthday, and Austin told me that I could do anything that I want, so here I am, making a video. Now you might say, Jeremy, why are you making a video on your birthday? You work for yourself, shouldn't you be taking the day off? And to that I say, yeah, probably, but I have no concept of what work-life balance is anymore, so cheers! So today we're gonna do some math because I wanna know what our revenue growth is like over the past few months because March is coming to an end, which means that the quarter's closing, which means that we have some projections to do over the next few days. Let's fire up the math machine, boys! All right, I changed my shirt and it's also tomorrow. No longer my birthday. I got distracted. The good news is that Austin blessed me with some Professor Excel magic, and we're gonna take a look at some projections. So the first thing that I want to do here is talk about what we call monthly recurring revenue, MRR. Why are you using MRR, Jeremy? Well, Timothy, Jalimothy, I'll tell you. I come from a tech background. I worked at a software as a service company, and in tech, when you work for a SaaS or software as a service company, usually your primary revenue metric, the thing that you're measuring your income from, is MRR, monthly recurring revenue. So why we use MRR is because it gives you a consistent and measurable metric of how much money you're bringing in from your clients in a given month. For us, a client signs a proposal and then connects a bank account and they're billed every month on the first, like clockwork. That way we don't have to go chasing checks. We don't have to go, trying to figure out collections. We just get that money in each month. Super easy thanks to Ignition. Shout out to them. The number two reason that we like to use MRR is because it is predictable. So because we know that we have X amount of clients being billed X amount, we can then use that to, budget out into the future. Of course, there are other projects that we're doing, one-off things that we might have coming in or contracts that we might have that are just hourly. But MRR is our basis for understanding exactly what's coming in monthly that we can rely on in the company, short of any users canceling or anything like that. The third reason that we use MRR is because it allows us to then take those metrics that we're seeing each month and project out into the future. By seeing that consistent monthly number, we can then make a projection based on what we've seen in the past to then calculate revenue growth. One of the most complicated things that Austin and I always tell our clients is that projecting revenue for a service-based business is really, really hard. MRR then solves that problem because it allows us to see how much we're bringing in each month, how much we're bringing in the future month, and then project from there. I'll show you what I mean. So I've gone ahead and downloaded some data from Ignition. This is information that has been anonymized by Ignition and is just consistent with what we're currently doing. So you'll see data up until March that's this month, and then price per client here. So what we can do with this data is we can take this information and then we can build a table that will allow us to say exactly what we're bringing in each month. So right now this data is formatted nicely, but I think that we can do a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and pivot this information by adding in a pivot table. So I'll go ahead and in Google Sheets, I'm going to grab a pivot table and I'm going to place it on my existing sheet right here.
3 hours later.
So that's going to give me a breakdown of the year, month, and the total amount of MRR, monthly recurring revenue, that we're seeing in that given time period. I'm also going to add in a client ID section to the values here just to show the count of how many customers there are for this particular month. And we can we can start making a table that will allow us to project out what we're going to see in the next quarter, the next year, and beyond. So we're going to go ahead and take a similar structure to this table here. So I'm going to grab date, month, year, and we'll do this. We're going to call this added MRR, and we're going to call this total MRR. Sounds good. All right, so now we can take this information that we have in our pivot table and we can grab what happened in a given month. So for example, January, we added $13.99. February, we added $1.99. March, April, May, June, all were 0. And then we picked up again in July. Now we have our added MRR for basically the entire company's history. And what we can do is we can then take a look at what our total MRR is. So that's just a simple formula. That's at first just going to be $13.99 for January, but then we'll do $13.99 plus $1.99, which we're seeing is a suggestion here. That's what I'm going to do. So then I'm going to grab the formula and just drag it down. So what this is telling me is that in January we had $13.99, February we had $1.99 added. So for a total of $1,598 in MRR. So $1,500, of course, ending in March, of an MRR of $6,070. So from here, we can then project what's going to happen. So let's take a look at an average percentage in MRR growth. And we're going to say February MRR, total monthly recurring revenue, minus January total monthly recurring revenue, divided by January total monthly recurring revenue. And that's going to give us a percentage to see how much we grew from January to February. So our total MRR grew by 14.22%. Great. Let's drag this formula down and we'll see that we have an average growth rate here of 11.91%. Now, when we're looking at 2021, you'll see that we have 7 months where we booked absolutely nothing. So our MRR growth was stagnant. That meant that no new revenue was getting added on, no new clients were being booked. Our MRR stayed the same. When we look at January, February, March of this year, we started doing a lot more marketing. We started networking in local networking groups. We started doing this video series. We're really pushing hard and trying to grow and get more consistent numbers. We had 3 great months so far in this year, and we're only continuing into these next few months. So my hope is that we will not see any more $0 months. Now, obviously, that might not happen. We might have a $0 month. We might have 4 $0 months. Who knows? I certainly don't. And if you say you do, you're wrong. Everything is unknowable and nothing is for sure. So what we're going to do is we're going to take an average of, I'm actually just going to call this growth percentage, this column. But what we're going to do is we're going to take an average growth percentage based on the percent that we're seeing over the year, and then based on the percent that we're seeing over this quarter. On average, over the entire course of the company's history, we've grown by just shy of 12%. Over this past quarter, the MRR growth has been 20%, which is massive. So what does that mean? If we look at what happened throughout the year, we'd be able to see that over time, our MRR at a 20.5, let's be specific, 20.5% growth rate, our MRR would end up being $32,516 per month. That would mean that our yearly MRR, or ARR, which stands for annual recurring revenue, would then be this amount times 12. So we'd say that we have $390,000 in annual recurring revenue if our monthly recurring revenue was to grow at the average rate of this past quarter. That's massive. That is a lot. of growth. That is just a ridiculous amount of growth, especially because this is a compounding average. So every month builds off the past month. I don't know if we can get to that. What if instead of 20%, we use the total growth rate? So again, this is the entire history of the company, the amount of money the amount of growth that we've seen in MRR over from March of 2020 all the way back to our first little bit of growth. That is going to be 11.91%. So that gets us to $16,712 in MRR, about $200,000 in annual recurring revenues. Now, I do think that 12% is a pretty decent projection based on, just based on the year, what we could get to. You might be thinking, Jeremy, why don't you just use regular revenue? Why are you using this fancy monthly recurring revenue metric? That seems a little ridiculous. Well, you're kind of correct. It is ridiculous, right? We can take a look at why we want to use MRR and why it's so useful instead of looking at just the one-off. Just hit myself in the face with the mic. When we look at from January to February to March, we're seeing that we had $0 in income until March. From here, we see giant swings in our income from almost $5,000 to almost $1,400 to $8,000 to our biggest month, $29,000. When we look at a percentage of this, so again, the same formula that we used last time, this month minus the previous month divided by the previous month, that gives us a growth rate. On average, we're seeing about 72%. So we could say that our average growth rate in revenue is 72.12%. Just this quarter, we've seen an average of 32% growth in revenue. Those are very different numbers. And when we look at what actually happened, yes, 72% growth over that period of time seems massive. But actually, those were because of a lot of outliers here. We're seeing 30 grand, we're seeing 20 grand, and then we're seeing months where it's $1,400, months where it's $5,000. This is a huge array of data that we have here. This includes one-off projects. This includes things that we build hourly for. This includes massive changes in our revenue because of the inconsistency of billing. So when we look at the recurring revenue, the thing that we can count on every month to happen, again, like I said, client signs the contract, we connect a bank account, money gets billed every month. We know that this is consistent. We know that we're consistently adding on revenue each month. So the last thing to do here now is we're just going to take these recurring revenue projections and we're going to pop these into our actual budget. So we're going to make sure that, we're projecting out a growth rate of 12% in our MRR. So that means that we're going to plug in from April to December these figures of added MRR and total MRR. And that's going to show us exactly what's going to happen over the next 12 months. Again, might not happen. Things might be different. We could grow by 1,000%. Who knows? What this does is that this then allows us to see, are we default alive or are we default dead? God, I hope we're default alive.